Good Tuesday afternoon, friends. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandages here with your Atlantic Tropical Update, and we've got a lot of changes since we last spoke yesterday. Invest 94L that was yesterday is now PTC Two, potential tropical cyclone number 2, which will very likely be Bonnie within the next 12 to 18 hours, even by later tonight, most likely. Plus, the area we're watching in the Gulf of Mexico, the tropical wave yesterday, has now been tagged another invest, this time 95L. Today is June 28th, 2022. Take note of that date, only 4 weeks into the season, and we're already pretty active, honing in on our second named storm of the season. Potentially could have our third named storm before not too long. Let's start off quickly at the Gulf. I'll talk more about this in just a few minutes. But this one close to home here in southeast Texas, now up to a 40% chance in the short range and the long range for development. Really, the window of opportunity for this to develop is a close one. It's really a small window within the next 12 to 18 hours, because then it's going to move over land, be away from its fuel source, and start to diminish and fall apart. Elsewhere out in the Atlantic, we've got two systems. A tropical wave here, low chances, 20% in the long term of 5 days. And then there is PTC number 2, which will be Bonnie in the short term. All right, the latest here, 94L renamed. And I used renamed on purpose rather than an upgrade, because it's not really an upgrade to a potential tropical cyclone. All that's really changed is that the wind speeds are now achieving tropical storm force. And they were actually prior to this being renamed to a potential tropical cyclone. We're still lacking, though, a closed center of circulation. And you need that. You need to check that box to get the upgrade to either a tropical depression or a tropical storm. In this case, it will be a tropical storm because we already have tropical storm force winds, 39 miles per hour or greater. Now, Hurricane Hunter aircraft, whether it be NOAA or the Air Force Hurricane Hunters, have been flying into this system rather frequently. They're on their third or fourth mission, I believe, into the storm, doing reconnaissance, trying to find that closed center of circulation, that defined center, have yet to be able to do so, which is why it remains a potential tropical cyclone as of the latest advisory from the Hurricane Center. And then Invest 95L tagged in the Gulf of Mexico. Small window for development, as I mentioned, really the next 12 to 18 hours. All right, let's start with a little more in-depth about what's going on with PTC number 2 and what has changed since we last spoke yesterday. Forward speed has increased slightly. Yesterday it was moving at 20 miles an hour. Now it's at 23. Its quick movement impedes it from really taking full advantage of the conducive environment where it's currently located. And what do I mean by conducive environment? Well, we've got a lack of wind shear, a lack of dry air, and a lot of very warm ocean water that extends down to a depth. So plenty of energy for this to use. Also, what's impeding it, the lack of a closed center of circulation that would allow it to be able to ventilate and have that energy transfer take place a little bit more easily. Not the case just yet. It's moving to the west, as I mentioned, but it's also gaining latitude. Yesterday, if you remember, I talked about how low latitude this was, a low runner. And now it's gaining latitude. It's at 10 degrees north. Still pretty low latitude, but it is on kind of a west-northwest trajectory rather than westerly trajectory, as it's indicated by the last update there. Winds of 40 miles per hour, again, so tropical storm force winds. Hurricane hunters have pretty frequently found those winds being consistent, so no change in that, but overall that circulation center is just not well defined. Also, the renaming of a potential tropical cyclone allows the hurricane center, despite it achieving all the criteria of being a tropical storm, to allow to issue tropical storm watches and warnings in areas that will be impacted by the storm in the short term. So we do have those for the southern Windward Islands, Trinidad and Tobago, the northern coast of Venezuela. In the yellow is a tropical storm watch. In the orange is a tropical storm warning. The warning means more imminent. Within the next 36 hours, you'll have tropical storm conditions. You have a little more lead time with a watch being extended out to around 48 hours. Those warnings extend all the way to Aruba and Curacao over the next day and a half as this races off to the west. I would not be surprised if these extended farther to the north to include St. Lucia and Martinique, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Barbados as well, because current model trends do take this lifting a little bit more north than what was originally anticipated. Now, we have the advisories coming out now every couple of hours. We get 8 a day now that it's been designated as a potential tropical cyclone. So these are all in Central Time. We just got the intermediate 1 p.m. advisory. Next up will be at 4 p.m. Central Time, and this is a full advisory. This gives us an update to the forecast cone that I'll show you just a little bit. That's coming off the 10 o'clock advisory from this morning. An update to that will be at 4. Any changes to watches and warnings, storm details, and locations. So really the only difference between intermediate and full will be a change in any of the forecast trajectories or track or cone of uncertainty coming our way to decipher where the storm may go in the short and long term. So here's a different look, a different perspective of PTC number 2. This is visible satellite imagery, basically looking down from the sky from the satellite, and this is what it looks like. Of course, there's color out there. This is in black and white, but you can see the same general overall spin. This is looking much more consolidated in its overall churning in the Atlantic basin out there, and it is building towards the southern Windward Islands. We have the inflow to the south and inflow also aloft to the northeast. Building on it, we've got that overall broad circulation. So it's on its way to becoming Bonnie. Also, its spin, its velocity, its relative vorticity in the atmosphere is still a little bit disorganized. You can see here on this latest imagery, we want to see it become more centralized and circular in nature. That's still not doing that. It actually looks a little bit worse than it did yesterday. It was looking a little more consolidated. Not the case, at least with this most recent image. Now, water vapor imagery depicting the dry air and moist air. I told you that we have conducive environmental conditions, a lack of dry air, which is the copper color here. That's some Saharan dust. It's remaining well to the north, and a big factor in that is because of how low latitude this has been. It is staying free of that, not getting pulled into its circulation in any level of its general overall organization so far. So that's helping it stay together despite it still being rather ragged in nature. Now here's a look at the latest Hurricane Hunter aircraft reconnaissance mission. So this is different from yesterday. This is actually the U.S. Air Force conducting reconnaissance rather than NOAA. So they're staging out of the U.S. Virgin Islands, St. Croix, flying into the system from there. NOAA is staged in Barbados, and they've been flying missions out of there into the storm. So a little bit closer. We're going to get a NOAA mission coming up here in just the later parts of this afternoon, and they'll conduct similar things, similar mission to see if we can get that center of circulation defined and get that upgrade to a tropical storm. So what flew into it this morning? Well, that's the U.S. Air Force. It's a C-130 aircraft. It flies in an alpha pattern, and it's airborne for about 8 to 12 hours, so making that flight from St. Croix. Its main mission is to find the lowest of the pressure and the highest of the winds, and also where that wind direction does indicate a closed-off circulation. So we're not seeing that right now, which has kept it staying as a potential tropical cyclone. So Hurricane Hunter aircraft, the next couple of missions that are scheduled out there for the next 24 hours. 4 p.m. today, we're going to have the U.S. Air Force again later on tomorrow morning, and then tomorrow morning again at 9:30, the NOAA will conduct a flight into the storm. All right, PTC number 2 here. Here is the cone of uncertainty, the forecast track for where this will be going over the next 5 days. It's a 5-day forecast cone here. And you can see it pretty much due west. Now, heading into an area of warm waters, low wind shear, no dry air, we do expect it to become Bonnie. It just may take a little while to get there. Once it gets into the Caribbean, conditions conducive for it to develop. But notice something here. Up to 40 miles per hour, tropical storm. Up to 50 Wednesday evening, tomorrow evening. And then Thursday morning, a little bit of weakening. That's because it may graze the northern coast of Venezuela or move over Aruba and Curacao. Any land interaction with a developing tropical cyclone impedes it because it takes it away from its fuel source, the warm ocean water. So any land interaction with already a pretty dismal storm will throw it off its axle, right? So it's not very balanced just yet. So it'll throw it off a little bit. So land interaction there would lead to some weakening. They're anticipating that in this forecast track. But from there on out, it's open, warm waters of the southern Caribbean, so strengthening up to 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm Friday morning, and potentially our first hurricane of the Atlantic season before it makes landfall in Nicaragua pre-dawn Saturday morning at 75 miles per hour, Category 1, low-grade Category 1 hurricane, bringing lots of rain and wind to the coastal areas there in Nicaragua. So what do the models see? Pretty much all models on board with this same scenario, due west trajectory. A reason for that is because we've got a steering pattern that's not all that complicated, which is unusual because it's typically pretty hard to pinpoint where these storms will move because there's so many different factors and variables to put into play that determines where it will go. But a big broad ridge of high pressures locked up to the north here, and it's sprawling, and that means that's going to suppress this to the south and keep it moving on a westward trajectory. So the GFS ensemble, which is what I'm showing you here, the GFS model, you've probably heard that used before, but these are the ensemble members, and there are 30 of them. Basically what this is a different rendition of the GFS model that's tweaked 30 different times. We just changed the variables a little bit to see if we get a different outcome, and this is what you get. Pretty good consensus here. How about the European model? Very, very similar. Now, there are more ensemble members with this. We're up to 51, but even all of those very much on top of one another, tracking it due west, clipping maybe the northern coast of Venezuela. Now, I will tell you, there are some other models that are coming out more recently that do show this gaining a little more latitude and staying well north of Venezuela, which is why if that does occur, we'll likely see a stronger storm because the land interaction would be limited. So keep that in mind. That's still a possibility, despite the consensus and consistency of all of these members keeping it south and west through the duration of its lifetime. Now let's compare the operational model. So the operational GFS and the European. The GFS is going to be in the yellow. These lines, by the way, are isobars, lines of equal pressure. So when they get really tight together, that is a strong storm. When they're spread out, it's very weak and disorganized. So here we are at the current time. You've got the GFS in the yellow. The red is the European model. European very sprawled out, not really showing anything at the moment. GFS starting to try to signal a closed off center of circulation. Going forward, we'll jump to tomorrow evening, Wednesday. Here we are. It's right over both models, the European and GFS showing it right over Aruba at this point, clipping the northern coast of Venezuela, both as minimal, maybe tropical storms at that point. And then it's in the open waters of the southern Caribbean. GFS really locks on this. European is a little bit lagged behind, showing it's still weak. GFS strengthening it. And look what happens right before landfall, pre-dawn Saturday morning in Nicaragua. We've got a bona fide hurricane likely here, Category 1, which is what the forecast calls for. GFS is on board with that. European says, I don't really think that's going to happen. So we do have disagreement in the long term on intensity of the storm, but notice the forecast track is pretty much very, very much similar, both models leaning towards that westerly track, and then it builds out, weakens, and heads possibly into the eastern Pacific, maybe redevelopment down the line. So we have the lack of wind shear. Here's what it is right now. I'll show you it on its forecast track for the next 5 days. Minimal interaction with any wind shear, which will keep it straight up, right? When you get wind shear, it tilts and wobbles the storm. The lack of any of that keeps it building vertically. Also, any Saharan dust or dry air. Saharan dust is indicated by the yellows, oranges, and maroon colors there. That's all well north because, again, all of this is the ITCZ, the Intertropical Convergence Zone, which is spitting out PTC 2. And since it stayed such low latitude, it has avoided that dust and the wind shear. We've got the very warm sea surface temperatures out there as well. I mean, they're looking at, 80, 85, 87 degree water temperatures. In fact, on its forecast track going forward, here we go, we've got some plots here, 84 degree water temperatures. Now, to get that heat transfer going on from the ocean to the storm system itself, that thermodynamic profile, you need 80 degree water temperatures or warmer. And we certainly have that, and that's not really a problem anywhere in the basin at the moment. On top of that, the warm water at the surface in many locations extends down to quite a depth, and that's beneficial to developing storms because when they start to get stronger, they mix up the ocean waters with the winds they generate, and that leads to something called upwelling. So that's upwelling and pulling up cooler ocean water from a depth. When you have the warm water that extends down quite a distance, it's just mixing up more and more warm water. Now, in the case of PTC 2, its forecast track going forward and the ocean heat content, not so much in line with this helping to upwell warmer waters. In fact, it's quite shallow, the warm water here near the coast off of South America. You have to head a little bit farther to the north for that deep, warm water in the eastern portions of the Caribbean. Now, that being said, say this adjusts and takes a little bit more of a west-northwest track going forward. It moves a little bit farther north and clips that deeper, warmer water, we could certainly see a stronger storm system here. It's not off the table. Overall, the entire Atlantic Basin, including the main development region, which is going to be our focal point for tropical development in about the next month, month and a half or so, leading through the rest of the season, is temperatures departing from the average that we see this time of year. They're running, 3, 4, 5 degrees above normal. Each degree is just that much more energy that's available for storms to take advantage of and grow in strength and organization. Also of note, there's the entire Caribbean above normal. The entire Gulf of Mexico noticeably above normal, especially the northern Gulf that's off the charts above normal in terms of sea surface temperatures. All right, so even though this is going to be a minimal grade tropical storm in the next couple of days, it's still bringing impacts. You have to remember that. Even though it may be a minimal grade, you're going to get the tropical downpours, you're going to get the rain, you're going to get the wind. So rainfall totals here from now going through Friday, so the next 4 or 5 days, output from the GFS shows that some of the southern Windward Islands, northern coast of Venezuela, could see up and over a half foot of rain. Beneficial, but also can lead to mudslides and other issues in terms of flooding. So going forward, we'll have to watch out for that. Again, if this adjusts a little farther north, more of the Windward and Leeward Islands be impacted from this. In terms of the wind, going forward from here, you're looking at Trinidad and Tobago potentially getting tropical storm force winds, 39 miles per hour or greater. You have to also keep in mind, with this being an organizing tropical storm as it's heading through this area, its wind field is quite small. So unless it's heading right on top of you, you likely won't see tropical storm force winds. Regardless, it'll be a breezy day. Also, I want to show you what's interesting here. Remember how we talked about on the forecast cone how it strengthens a bit and then weakens a little bit as well? That is depicted here as well in terms of the wind speed probabilities. Notice the probabilities are higher, 40% for tropical storm force winds here, and then we see a little bit of a drop-off after its interaction potentially with Aruba, and then a strengthening, so a broader area likely seeing tropical storm force winds as this heads west towards Nicaragua. All right, I know that was a lot. Let's now jump north to Invest 95L. You remember what Invest means? Investigative area. 95 is just a number, recycled from 90 to 99, and the L, it's in the Atlantic Basin overall. So here it is in the northwestern portions of the Gulf of Mexico. Infrared satellite here depicts the cloud height temperatures, cloud top temperatures, I should say. We're not seeing a ton of convective activity here with this, and a lot of it is sprawled out, disorganized in nature. But you can see a broad rotation here, and this is just a decaying area of low pressure riding along a decaying front. Anytime you introduce that into a very warm ocean environment, you get the potential of there being some tropical development as a result. So these chances have actually doubled since we last talked. It was 20% yesterday. Now it's at 40% within 2 days. And as I mentioned, that window is quite small and limited for it to develop before it moves onshore and inland into Texas. Visible satellite imagery, you can kind of see and decipher more of this broad rotation. It's definitely trying to get its act together. It's taking advantage of the extremely warm sea surface temperatures that we just talked about. So here is that trend line of where it's been going. It's kind of been meandering here for the past 12 hours or so, but water temperatures are even warmer than where PTC number 2 is. These are in the upper 80s, low 90s, and they extend down a great depth too. So if it was to get going, we'd likely see it briefly intensify and then move over land and fall apart as it does so. That being said, as it moves over land, that introduces the flooding risk because it's going to track to the west of Houston, and that keeps this entire area on the wet or the dirty side of tropical cyclones. So that's going to pull in the Gulf moisture, drive it well inland to the east of Dallas and all the way up into portions of Oklahoma and Arkansas as we go through the upcoming weekend. And those totals could go 4, 5, 6 inches, and most of this area experiencing extreme drought conditions. So beneficial, but flooding could also be an issue as we go forward. The next names on the list, we've only used Alex so far. We've got Bonnie, and then we've got Colin. So we've got the 95L out there, could briefly get a name. And also we've got PTC number 2 that will get a name in the next couple of days. All right, that's all I've got to talk about. I know it's been a long time. Thank you for watching. In the meantime, if you want to talk more about tropics, you have a question maybe about how things happen, how things form, you can find me on all these social media platforms. I just joined TikTok, so you can find me on there as well. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We'll see you again tomorrow.